What's up, everyone? How's it going? Against all odds, they let us get to Friday again. That means it's time for another episode of the Leaf podcast. If this is your first time listening to it, then it's kind of similar to the other videos that I put out on the channel, but it's more conversational. I'm asking more questions. I'm kind of giving my thoughts on some of the things that I come across. So of course, like any other video, I have a number of encounters with weird things that you don't know what they are, scary encounters with things you do know what they are, and in this episode I have a story about demonic possession. I haven't done one about that in quite a while, and I thought that I would kind of get one in there. But first, I have this encounter. It goes 27 years ago, when I was 20 years old. I was renting this house with two friends. We were just watching TV. It was maybe 3 a.m. So as we're watching TV, and we're just really kind of talking and shooting the shit, something slams into the glass door. We didn't think it was anything weird at first, although it did really startle us. We immediately got up and went outside. We thought that we would discover a wounded or a dead bird or something. This has happened before, but there was nothing. The backyard was totally empty. You could see the sliding glass door from the living room where we were sitting. So if there had ever been somebody out there, even somebody pulling a prank, we would have been able to see them running away. As we were standing there, WTFing, we hear the faint sounds of a modem connecting from inside. You know that weird modem handshake sound from the dial-up era. We of course go back inside. It's coming from the computer in the band practice room. We go in there. The computer is absolutely off. Nothing is on. At this point, we're really freaked out. We kind of grab onto each other as though we were schoolgirls. Eventually, the noise stopped, and we just ran out screaming. It was scary, and it was weird, but that's all that happened. Until a few weeks later, I was alone in the house. I was asleep in bed, and I was awakened by the sounds of a woman sobbing. I was paralyzed with fear. I stayed on my bed with the covers pulled up, just listening to this crying sound. It went on for what felt like hours. I was too afraid to get out of bed, and I'd seriously just laid there until dawn. Now, shortly after this, I did move out because there was just too much weird stuff happening. But my friends kept living there, and stuff like this still happened, including one night where two of my friends were about to go out into the backyard, and then they saw a person with a dog's head in the backyard. When it noticed them, it ran, climbed over a wall, and ran away on all fours. So I don't think I have to say that this is pretty peak high strangeness. What exactly do you think was going on here? What do you think caused the dial-up sound to happen? I did a different story a long time ago on the channel, where somebody was sleeping in a computer room. You can tell it's the 90s when there's still a computer room. But in that story, a similar thing happened. They were asleep in the room, and suddenly in the darkness, in this case, the computer monitor turned on despite the computer still being off, and through the speakers played a similar static sound to that dial-up handshake. And I believe that in this case, he could see some kind of shadow person or shadow entity that was also in the room at the time that seemed to be causing all of this interference. So I wonder if that had something to do with it. It's hard to say because he didn't see anything or they didn't see anything else besides just seeing the noise. Of course, there's also the knocks, the bangs, the woman sobbing, and at the very end, the thing with the dog's head. What do you think that was? Do you think it was a dog man? Do you think it was something else? I think that if it were me, I'd want to check and see what happened on that property. And not only that, I'd want to check and see if it was on a ley line or something. Now, I don't know a whole lot about ley lines. I just say that because I hear that they can attract really strange things to happen. And there's also a community that I've been to where every church is built on a ley line. And that's really cool, I think. And I'm not even sure if they planned it that way. I don't think they did. I think that was the happenstance that this is the property they happen to get. But yeah, that's kind of off topic. I just kind of thought of that. I've also heard too, places that just happen to be high in electromagnetic energy, or if there's power lines nearby, then weird stuff can happen. Now, I live near power lines and nothing's ever happened, so it may be something else. I'm just kind of going through what it may be because I have no idea. And this is where I ask you again, what do you think it was? And this next encounter was sent in anonymously, and it's just called a sighting. It says, in January 2006, I'm pretty sure that I saw an alien, or something of the sort. So when I was driving from somewhere near Gentry to Huntsville to visit my grandmother, I passed Rogers, and I went through Hobbs State Park. This was around 4:45 in the morning. I had seen some lights that, at first, I thought came from a helicopter that was flying over, and due to how close the park is to an airport, it seemed pretty reasonable to think this. Yet, I realized that it was hovering. So, tired me wants to park on the side of the road and look at it more. Well, the moment that I do, the lights disappear. I'm a little bit scared by this, confused, and I begin to drive off when I see 3 yellow lights charging from where the object was, straight at my vehicle in the rearview mirror. I nope out of there, and I see a golden light charging from my right, just as I'm speeding out. It barely misses my Cherokee, and in that split second, I saw it. It was like a centaur, but instead of a horse, it was a lizard with legs sprawled out and all. It had this weird head that looked like a combination of a snake, a human, and a saber-tooth skull, where the light was coming from. I also distinctly remember it holding some kind of spear, and the creature itself looked like it was in some kind of gray suit. As I finally got away, I could see the lights disappear back into the woods. I didn't tell anyone. When I arrived at my grandmother's, she asked why I looked so scared. I just said that I nearly got hit by a semi, and that I was thoroughly chewed out. I didn't tell anyone for years, and for some time after that, I still had night terrors. So I can't imagine anything like that ever happening to me. And for me, I don't know what would be the worst thought, either seeing the thing and remembering it, or thinking about what would have happened if I didn't get out of there. I kind of wonder too, if they feed off the fear of this person trying to escape. The reason why I say this is because if they caught up to them that fast, it probably means that they could have done something but chose not to. And I think that's scarier, that they just want to make you afraid, just for even a few minutes, feed off of it, and then leave. And then she continued to have night terrors for years afterwards. But what do you think that it was that she saw? I know that it really seemed like a reptilian. Do you think it was taking that form to scare her more? Do you think that's what it was and she got a glimpse of its true form? That's something that you can let me know in the comments. Another thought that I had just now while reading over this is the description of it kind of reminds me of something that you'd see like on an Egyptian tomb wall or like in a hieroglyph. I don't know if that has any connection at all. It's just the vibe that I got off of it. Now, if you know any depictions of reptilians that look like this, especially ones that seem to carry a staff of some kind or a rod, then again, let me know down in the comments. As I've said before, I know very little about the ET community or the UAP or UFO community or anything like this. A lot of my forte is with ghosts and that kind of stuff. So even when I read like all these crazy, insane cryptid ones, I feel like the wrestler Ron Simmons when he says, "Damn." So far, both of those encounters were pretty peak high strangeness. This next one is a demonic possession case that I have heard of before. I just couldn't remember any names associated with it, so I had a fun time trying to find this, but I found the article and I will link it in the description. But this case comes to us from the early 1900s in South Africa. A girl named Clara Germana was attending a school called St. Michael's Mission, and like I said, this was in South Africa, specifically Natal. Now Clara was unfortunately an orphan, but for all intents and purposes seemed to be fairly normal, even a little quiet, and she was just as devout as anybody else at the mission. Now, nothing at this point would say that anything was going on with her. Now, since record keeping at this point in time isn't fantastic, a lot of what is known about this has come from journals, diaries that were written by nuns and other sources at the mission. Now, it's a little unclear, as I said, as when the first incident started. It seemed like it was just a regular confession one day, when she made a confession to Father Erasmus that she had reached out to the devil for the purpose of making a deal. She didn't really give any details about why this happened, or what the deal even may have been. But this is generally agreed upon, as shortly after this at some point, things began to get weird. Now, the first thing that happened was that Clara didn't speak any other language than her native language, but she began to speak several other languages: Polish, German, French, Latin, and even others. And in the true stages of demonic possession, it started out with simple words, and then it seemed to steadily graduate, steadily evolve into full sentences, and then even ranting in these other languages. It's said that before this, she didn't even suggest any interest in learning these languages. Of course, this would leave everyone a little scared. Imagine you're seeing a 16-year-old girl who's usually very devout and very quiet, all of a sudden acting erratic, ranting in other languages that she doesn't even know. Another sign that something very strange was going on here was that when these episodes would start, Clara would kind of space out, go into a daze or some kind of trance, and then after it was all done, she would come back and she would be very confused as to what happened, seemingly unaware of what she had just done. Shortly after this, things got worse again. She started just spitting out the deepest and darkest secrets of those around her, even people that she had never seen before, never met before, including awful things that they had done, impure thoughts they had had, and apparently their most crazy, vulgar, and intense sexual fantasies. This is where the diaries of the nuns come in, where in their diaries they had said that she was right, and they had no idea how she was even able to possess this knowledge. They said it was information that she had no business knowing, that they had never told anyone ever. They began to feel like that Clara was somehow able to pull their thoughts out, was able to read their minds. And then in the following days it got worse still. She started to have an aversion to all religious imagery, everything. She would in fact take these super roundabout ways to get around having to look at these things or be near them. And even when she was in the same room, she began to wail and scream. One of the nurses described it like this: "No animal has ever made such sounds, neither the lions of East Africa nor the angry bulls. At times, it sounded like a veritable herd of wild beasts, orchestrated by Satan, had formed a hellish choir." And from here, things still got worse. All of a sudden, this once quiet girl would become very confrontational, wanting to fight all the time. Then, she began to possess somehow superhuman strength. In one instance, it took more than 4 people to barely hold her down. She was able to throw nuns across the room. Sometimes, too, she would be caught hissing, growling, or snarling at people around her. Usually this would be totally unprovoked. It was at this time when the nuns had had enough. They knew that indeed, this little girl, who was once so quiet and meek and devout, was possessed by a demon. Now, two Roman Catholic priests by the name of Reverend Mansuetti and Reverend Erasmus, who I think is the same guy that she gave her original confession to, went about performing this exorcism on Clara. And at first, when they went into the room to greet her, Clara immediately leapt out of the bed and leapt on top of Reverend Mansuetti, knocked away his Bible, and started to strangle him with his own stole. Now it took a group of nuns, as well as the other priest, just to pry her off of him. After this, she began going into a wild temper tantrum, throwing things at the nuns, at the priests, and everything, and then apparently levitated a full 5 feet off the floor. So by this point, they knew that this wasn't just an unruly child going through issues. This wasn't just a mental illness. This girl was really possessed. Apparently around the priest, she began to speak in tongues in a mocking way. And for the next 2 days, these priests confronted whatever was inside of her. And this thing also knew the difference between holy water and regular water. They would test this. They would spray regular water on her and nothing would happen. But then, holy water would send her into a rage. She would be screaming, yelling in different languages, and everything. Now apparently, not much else is known about how they got the demon out of her, but apparently the holy water was the key. So despite this case not being super well known and not being super well documented either, it seems to have been witnessed by a fair number of people, especially the nuns' diaries, the testimony of the priests, and everybody else that was at the school who would have come into contact with Clara. And if the whole thing was a mental illness, then I want to know what mental illness you have to levitate, feet into the air, spout out other people's darkest secrets, and also being able to speak languages that you can't speak. That'd be like me trying to speak German after I heard Rammstein one time. But it's definitely a harrowing experience, and I will link this article down below. I think that there were some other details about this whole thing, but I don't quite remember, so I'll just go over. Now again, I might be getting 2 cases completely mixed up. But you know, when you hear a lot of them or read a lot of them, some details kind of get crossed over every now and then. But the thing with the holy water, it may have been this one, but I seem to remember them like getting holy water from different churches, and whatever was inside of her began to know which church it came from. But since this one was in South Africa, that doesn't sound right. Just some of the details kind of cross over. But I don't know, I could be wrong. I'm kind of going off on a tangent there. So if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe. If you have little topics or things like that you'd like to hear about on the podcast, I guess. I'm getting my words all mixed up now. See, I can barely speak English. How would I ever be able to speak another language? You can post them in the comments, and I'll try to get to them. Yeah. And in the description, there's links to support the channel a little bit more. There's a hype feature on YouTube that really helps the channel, I hear. And I would be eternally grateful if you were to use one of your hype things on one of my videos. That would be great. Of course, there's super thanks and memberships here on YouTube. And on Sunday, I have another video coming out that I hope you'll be there for. It's more encounters from the absolute middle of nowhere, and some of them are really intense. So be sure to wait for that to come out. Should be around 2 p.m. Atlantic time. That's what time zone I'm in, I think. But yeah, I hope to see you Sunday. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, and I hope you enjoyed the video that already came out this week. And if you haven't seen it yet, be sure to go watch it. And with that, I will see you on Sunday. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend.